Hello, everybody, and welcome to a Friday edition of the PHLY Eagles Show. I'm Zach Berman here with Rich Hofmann as we close the week. And as you saw in the headline there, school's out for the summer. The Eagles finished their offseason program on Thursday. They are off now for the next 6 weeks or so before training camp begins. So that will give us ample opportunity to discuss what happened during the past 2 months, this past week as well. We'll get to that in today's show. We have Tic-Zach-Bo, but of course, our weekly Friday Tic-Zach-Bo does not include Bo. It includes Rich. So, Rich, thanks for joining us.
I think it's Rich Zach-Bo.
I like that, actually. So if we went Rich Zach-Bo, would people still get the tic-tac-toe thing? Or is this grandfathered in at this point?
Probably not, but that's all right. The sickos understand. They know what's going on.
Okay, so Rich, I always say this whenever Rich is on, make sure you're subscribing to the PHLY newsletter each day, the daily newsletter. It really gives you everything you need to know about Philly sports, and then you can watch 4 shows plus Anthony's show, so 5 shows plus the Union show some days, so 6 shows, and read all our content on allphly.com. But Rich's newsletter in your mailbox, email box every day shows you what's going on in an entertaining, fun way. So I appreciate you taking a few minutes away from the newsletter to join the show.
Yeah, man, let's play the game.
Absolutely. So those who watch us every Friday know the rules. We have 3 categories and 3 prompts for each category. The categories, as always, Eagles, NFL, and miscellaneous. The prompts are would you rather, convince me, and predict. So the one kind of change of pace here is I always give these prompts to Bo and today to Rich. For the Eagles category, it'll kind of be both of us joining in, especially because I've been on the practice field this week. So you jump in, Eagles, NFL, or miscellaneous. You pick and you pick the category.
Okay, Zach, let's start with Eagles, woodpecker, you rather.
Eagles, woodpecker, you rather. Now, I got to say, I go would you rather. All right, the woodpecker, you rather. That's a Bo thing. I'm not as a bird punny as he is, but would you rather Vic Fangio's defense after this spring, or Kellen Moore's offense after this spring? So I'll jump here. Then
I think I know what you're going to say. I think you're going to say the one that the best player did not say is 95% new yesterday, but you can go ahead and give me the answer because you, as you've said, you've been on the field, you've watched them every day, and you've also heard from all of the coaches and basically all the players this week, it seems like, right?
Exactly. So if I went with what I've seen, the spirit of this question is based on what we've seen to date. Based on what we've seen to date, the defense is ahead of the offense. Vic Fangio's defense looks more, I don't know, you'd say acclimated to the scheme or more ready, if you will, than the offense. Now, that said, it is June 7th. The Eagles don't play until September 6th. They have the entire training camp, the entire preseason. The very spirit of the offseason program is to introduce, is to practice, is to kind of get – so they are at the introductory stages. But I think the transition, whether it's because of the nature of the spring workouts, whether it's because it's the nature of the playbook, like you mentioned, Jalen Hurts saying 95% of the offense is different, whether it's because there's not really game planning right now on either side of the ball. So it's just kind of athleticism versus athleticism. The Vic Fangio defense looks ahead of the Kellen Moore offense. But the thing is this, when you look at the talent on the two sides, I much prefer the offense on Kellen Moore's side than the offense on Vic Fangio's side. So if you ask me, what do I think will be better this season? I would say the offense. If you said what's better right now, I would say the defense.
I mean, and Zach, isn't it not that surprising that the defense is ahead of the offense in general? I mean, you've covered, over, 12 or 13 of these things for the Eagles, right? At this point, at this point in the calendar, isn't it often that the defense is a little bit ahead? Like, doesn't the offense require a little bit more timing? Those things, but it's probably not the case all the time, but I feel like you've seen that happen before in general. That's the first part.
That's fair. That said, I understand it's a new scheme. You have a quarterback who's playing with the same receivers he's played with the past 2 years, 3 years in Devontae's case. Same tight end, right there. I get some of the route concepts are different. Certainly, like Jalen said, 95% of the offense is different. But you should see the offense. You shouldn't see the ball in the opposing defense's hand as much, on the ground as much. You should see it released earlier. Bo and I have talked about this, but I do think this time of year it is accurate that I tend to find the defense a little bit ahead of the offense.
So it's interesting you brought that up too. Like I wonder sometimes, because like, look, this is a ravenous football market, right? We care about practice here, and that's great. That's part of the reason we have jobs, right? Do we make a little too much of the Jalen Hurts off-season workouts, I would say, in that, like, wouldn't this be the time to try stuff? As a comedy guy yourself, you know that, to get to a tour or a Netflix special or whatever, you got to be willing to bomb in those small clubs, and you got to be willing to try jokes out at this point. I know it's not a 1-for-1 thing. You want to be practicing good habits. You want to be developing chemistry with receivers, but like, it doesn't matter right now. Like if you throw an interception, it doesn't go on your stats at this point. And I just wonder if there is like a little room for experimentation at this point of the offseason without like pressing the panic button.
Yeah. Do we pay? I think you framed the question a little too, or do we make a little too big a deal about this? We make way too big a deal about this, way more than we need to. I use the analogy in yesterday's show. It would be like someone reading the rough draft of a story, or even just like the transcription, right? Like, you haven't even put it together. And then sample size too is so limited, right? Like, and I'm not casting aspersions on anyone keeping stats. Elliott's my guy. Like I respect that, and there's a market for that. But if let's just take, in practice the other day, 20 passes, right? 20 passes is such a limited sample size relative to the amount of passes that are thrown throughout the offseason program, relative to the amount of passes that are thrown with the offseason and training camp combined. So part of it, frankly, is because we, the media, are only allowed at 5 of these sessions. So every session is under a microscope. In training camp, we're at 15, 18 practices. Every practice is under a microscope. And you do work on things. The analogy I would give is, imagine if like Bryce Harper struck out in spring training, and it's like, man, his swing's in trouble, right? Sample size matters so much here.
We don't care about spring training. Whit Merrifield was tearing the cover off the ball in spring training. That didn't translate. And look, I agree with you though that the offense has the talent where they probably should be a little bit farther ahead than the framing I gave you, where, the defense doesn't have to do as much. That said, they're changing stuff up. I think that's one of my big takeaways here, in that, it was kind of a mystery. It was kind of unclear when Nick Sirianni would say things like, okay, we're going to add on to what Kellen is going to add on to what we already do. That's not exactly what he said, but that was the gist of his comments at this point. To me, it kind of seems like we're going to figure out the new stuff first, just from reading and just from like listening to Jalen. We're going to figure out the new stuff first, and then we're going to add the stuff in from next year. Like, it does seem like there is a legitimate learning curve, especially for the quarterback here. And it seems like he admitted that yesterday.
Yeah, Jalen is very clear about that. And he's also very clear that this is the Kellen Moore offense, right? I think that's one, we'll get the kind of big picture takeaways of the offseason program in a different prompt here. But one of the takeaways I would say now is that, for as much discussion as there's been about the melding of concepts, this is Kellen Moore's offense. This is Kellen Moore and Doug Nussmeier bringing in a different offensive approach, different offensive scheme, and the players who are returning, in particular, these high-profile Pro Bowl guys that I mentioned, Jalen Hurts and A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, Dallas Goedert, high-profile guys on the offensive line, although the offensive line, there's only so many ways to block, right? But they are adjusting, learning to this new scheme.
Yeah. So
next prompt.
That's where we are. Okay, next prompt. I like the woodpecker you rather. So let's do that one for the NFL.
For the NFL, okay. You went to St. Joe's Prep. Kevin Stefanski went to St. Joe's Prep. So Kevin Stefanski, St. Joe's Prep, Penn, Eagles intern. These are he's in the news now. He signed a contract extension to stay in Cleveland. He's had success as an NFL head coach. What I am curious, your perspective, would you rather Kevin Stefanski as your head coach or Nick Sirianni as your head coach?
So that when you mentioned this, the first thing that came to mind is the perspective I want to know is Jalen Hurts' perspective. I want to give Jalen Hurts true serum and make him answer this question because, one of the things with Sirianni and Hurts is we've talked about a lot here is they are very different personalities and how they go about, in the heat of battle and kind of handling adversity and those things. Nick is very intense and he wears his emotions on his sleeves, all those things. It seems like Kevin Stefanski is a little bit more of a cool customer in the Jalen Hurts mold. So I would be kind of curious to hear him say that. So from my perspective, this one is hard. And I think it goes to show the difference between NFL coaches and what is required of them, like on each team, right? Rosters are different. You might need different things from a coach on this team versus that team. I think Kevin Stefanski is an above average coach, like he's solidly in the top, 12, 13, whatever. And watching the quarterback position for the Browns over the past couple of years, like it's been an unmitigated disaster. Like he is not working with the same exact tools that the Eagles have been. Now, in fairness, last year they had a great year. Jimmy Schwartz did a great job on defense. That was not all Stefanski. I'm not trying to give him all the credit, but man, watching him scheme up like Amari Cooper and David Njoku with Joe Flacco throwing the ball, it was pretty impressive. I thought he had a really nice season. And look, he's basically had 2 great seasons and 2 seasons at this point. But he's made the playoffs with both Baker Mayfield and with basically Joe Flacco in this crazy quarterback situation. And, I think this can change from year to year because obviously Nick's record speaks for itself. He had a great couple of years. Those first 2 years, I thought his first year in particular, the change to run the ball at the end of the season, I thought that was a coach getting the most out of his team in that specific season. But unfortunately, the end of last season has consequences, Zach. And I mean, not like it had any consequences for Nick's job. Maybe it had consequences in terms of like how much he's able to do for this current team. But one consequence is that I would rather have Kevin Stefanski ahead of him, at least right now.
Yeah, Kevin Stefanski is a 2-time NFL Coach of the Year winner. Think about that. In 4 years as a head coach, he's won Coach of the Year twice. Okay, I think this comes down to the question is how much is it as players, how much of it is coaching. If you look at Stefanski, who's 37-30 in his career and hasn't had the same offensive talent, at least as Sirianni, he calls plays, so he kind of checks that. The flip side is Nick Sirianni in 3 years as head coach, okay, has made the playoffs all 3 years. He's made the Super Bowl, has had 2 double-digit win seasons. Stefanski now has had 2 double-digit win seasons as well. He's also had 2 losing seasons in there. Nick Sirianni won 2 he's won 2 playoff games. Kevin Stefanski's won 1-2 in the playoffs. So Sirianni is 2-3. Stefanski's 1-2. But Sirianni undoubtedly has had more talent on his team, especially 100%. These past 2 years. So yeah, it's a terrific question. I think temperament-wise, considerably different, right? Kevin Stefanski's much more, he's more reserved on the sideline in his public comments. I like Nick. Nick's had more success. I think I was going to say Stefanski's one of the most underrated coaches in the league. He's won Coach of the Year twice, right? So he's certainly not underrated. I would have to go with Nick because Nick's been to the Super Bowl. Nick's been to the playoffs all 3 years. But if you factor in play calling and play design, I think Stefanski's really good in that department.
I think they're close, and it's a matter of, do you prefer the play caller or do you prefer the culture setter or the CEO type coach? And I think both of those kind of type of coaches can have long-ranging success, right? If the play caller continues to adapt, Sean Payton over the years, and continues to be ahead of the curve, that can be invaluable. But if the play caller grows stale, then he's out of a job at some point. So I think it's a good question. I think they're probably, I looked at a couple coach rankings. They were kind of in like the 8 to 13 range, both of them too. So I don't really hate the answer either way. I think you can go with Nick and make a perfectly reasonable argument there.
Let's knock one more out here before we take a quick break.
All right, let's do a quicker one. Let's do a miscellaneous one. Actually, those are a little bit longer. Okay, let's do prediction NFL.
Prediction NFL. I don't know if you saw Ben Johnson's comments last week. Ben Johnson, of course, the Lions offensive coordinator, who was a hot coaching candidate last year and turned it down. There was talks that he wanted a lot of money. That you don't typically see for a coordinator becoming a coach. And he basically said that when he takes his job, he wants the best pathway to a second contract. Of the eight guys hired, right, most are going to be out of their jobs within 3 years. And so he wants more of kind of conditions that he feels are necessary for sustainable success, which is certainly his prerogative. So here's a prediction. Here's your prediction. Is Ben Johnson a head coach in 2025, and where?
I think he is a head coach. And I'm going to say the Dallas Cowboys.
Interesting. Okay, so you think in that case, Jerry Jones would go with the hot coordinator route instead of Bill Belichick or kind of the established head coaching name?
Well, the other one I was thinking about was the team we're talking about right now in general.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I certainly think that speculation will be out there if the Eagles undergo a coaching change. Ben Johnson certainly makes he fits a lot of what the Eagles look for. I thought Washington would have been a good job for him. You get the number 2 pick. You can develop a quarterback. You have you have cap space. You kind of have the runway of starting over. Carolina's been interested in him twice. He's from that area. He's turned it down. So certainly it seems he's willing to be selective. It would surprise me. I don't think people turn down the Dallas Cowboys job, right? It's kind of like the Lakers job. We're seeing now with Dan Hurley. That's a difficult job to turn down. So I would imagine that if the Dallas Cowboys come offering, there's probably a pathway to success. Although you have to believe in their quarterback situation. You have to believe in Dak Prescott.
Jerry's been loyal to coaches too for the second contract thing too.
Exactly.
So.
Although Mike McCarthy's a lame duck coach this year, which would be interesting to see. I do think Ben Johnson's a head coach, but I thought Ben Johnson would have been a head coach this offseason. So I respect anyone who kind of beats their own drum and has the courage of conviction. That's a great attribute. But there's also an argument.
There's risk.
Striking when the iron's hot, for sure.
Totally. There's risk. And I understand what he said, because he went through, all the coaches. He was like, the numbers will tell you that more than half of them will be out of a job in 3 years. And I want to get that second contract. And I respect that. The only risk he's taking, though, is like he's going to continue to be evaluated as a coordinator. And you mentioned striking while the iron's hot. What if Jared Goff regresses this year? What if, we saw this with the Eagles. The Eagles were essentially the Lions last year, the team that came out of nowhere, had a great roster, kind of cutting edge play calling at that point. We've seen it in the NFL. Sometimes those teams regress the next year for whatever reason. It could just be injuries. And, I also, when Ben Johnson made those comments, Zach, I think Nick Sirianni and Doug Peterson are good examples of the other side of that coin, because those guys would not have gotten any other job except the Eagles at that point. I think that's right.
Yeah. And again, neither one interviewed for a job. That's correct.
And if you looked at kind of the articles, there's always a storyline heading into the offseason. It's a good content idea, is which of the open jobs is the most appealing, best job. I think the Eagles they definitely were last when Doug was the hire. And I think they were also at least close to last when Nick was the hire as well. And look, the Eagles might be an outlier. Howie has proven he is very good at cleaning up first Chip's mess and now his mess. The second time, he does that very quickly, and I'm sure that's something you can't bank on for other franchises. But like Nick did not walk in a great job. It was like a developmental job. And then the second year, he's got the best roster in the NFL. So it does go to show that like there is some risk in being choosy, like I think you've probably said this before. Perfect is the enemy of good, right? And that's kind of the sentiment I think of with Ben Johnson. Like the Washington job, yeah, I don't know if how Josh Harris will be as an owner, but working with the second overall pick and having the runway, and I think at least like fairly low expectations to start, I would have strongly considered taking that job if I were him.
Well, sometimes if you are taking a job and you don't know if you're going to be there long term, you rent. But if you buy, you're going to want a good mortgage. And the place to go for all mortgage needs is Mortgage CS. Rates are slightly higher, but home prices are still rising. Mortgage CS can help you get into a home before they go higher and also refinance to save money when rates drop. Who doesn't love that? The same house with a lower payment. Values are expected to keep going up. So don't put off buying just because rates are slightly elevated. Refinancing with Mortgage CS is straightforward. When rates drop, Mortgage CS will monitor your refinance opportunities and ensure you save money responsibly. You don't want to pay a ton of fees when you refinance, and you'll never get that at Mortgage CS. In the end, you'll be so happy you texted Ben, the CEO of Mortgage CS, at 267-391-7425. There's a reason people win more with Mortgage CS, so call or text Ben now at 267-391-7425 and see for yourself. You can also go to www.mortgagecs.com/PHLY to check them out or view their 350 plus perfect 5-star ratings by searching Mortgage CS right now. And then let me tell you something. It is the weekend. You're probably getting together with friends tomorrow, watching the Phillies game. Or you could be watching the NBA Finals, whatever it may be. And you want to be, as Bo would say, sucking them back with the boys. I would say just having a good time. And you'll do that with Miller Lite because a lot's changed over the years. One thing that hasn't is the great taste of Miller Lite. Another thing that hasn't changed is that it's less filling. So what is the best thing about original light beer? Miller Lite sparked that debate in 1975, and we still haven't settled it. I always look forward to the taste of a smooth Miller Lite because Miller Lite keeps it simple. It's undebatable quality, great taste, and only 96 calories. It's the beer that strips away everything you don't need and holds on to what matters most. A light beer that tastes like beer, less filling, and only 96 calories. The original light beer since 1975. That's exactly what you want. Quality taste, less filling, and only 96 calories. You don't have to choose what's best. Miller Lite has great taste and is less filling. Tastes like Miller time to get Miller Lite delivered right to your door. Visit MillerLite.com/PHLY Birds, or you can find it pretty much anywhere that sells beer. Celebrate responsibly. Miller Brewing Company, Milwaukee, Wisconsin. 96 calories per 12 ounces, fewer calories and carbs than premium regular beer. All right, so we're rolling through here. What's the next category prompt on your list?
I have a quick question for you because you mentioned this already, and I've been thinking about this a lot over the last 24 hours. Danny Hurley, if you are him, what's the move?
I take the Lakers job, if I'm being honest with you.
Yeah?
Now, look, I believe in don't mess with happy. Like that's something I've always heard from Mark Few, for instance. There is validity there. I also believe in like challenging yourself. And you're like, yeah, like keep on
just another college basketball coach. That's funny.
And well, I'm thinking of someone who just like stayed in the same place. And Mark, and I think, look, Dan Hurley, he can three-peat, and that's something that like hasn't been done. I get that. Lakers' job is special, and you get a chance to presumably coach LeBron. I imagine LeBron's coming back. You get a chance to coach Anthony Davis. The Lakers always can get talent, right? There's institutional commitment there. I imagine, when you look at the resources that they're willing to devote to get you from UConn. I also think that, like, I love college basketball. I love college football. If I had my choice between the two and I was a coach, I would rather coach professional sports right now.
Yeah, you hear that a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the college game is is changing quite a bit. You're really at the whim of teenagers, and I am all for like people getting their market value and getting their worth, and that's happening now in college sports, and it hasn't happened in the past. That said, when you combine that with basically like yearly free agency, you can transfer, right?
Yeah.
There's not necessarily contract terms, and that's how a lot of jobs are. But I think the NBA and the Lakers in particular, it's a special opportunity. It just comes down to me, like, what more are you going to accomplish at UConn? I always think to what Jim Harbaugh said when Jim Harbaugh left Michigan, which was, you can't win the Super Bowl in college football, right? And you can't win the NBA Finals coaching college basketball. He's already been up there at the end of on the first Monday in April twice. He's experienced that. He has not won an NBA title. So I would shoot for that, but he's obviously got to do what's best for him.
It's a tough one. I think coaching LeBron is like, that sounds great. He's also 40, and it's also like not the easiest guy in the world to coach. Like, he's very stuck in his ways. But I agree. And also, he's probably going to double his salary with the Lakers too. That's and live in Los Angeles as well. So I get it. Yeah, you do see that. I guess you see that in football as well, where the coaches generally say like, look, forget the actual game and how the sport is played at this level, just the recruiting and all of the nonsense you have to deal with, the boosters and stuff. They tend to want to go pro, it seems like, and that seems to be the case of football
the
too.
flip side is, if you need a point guard, you can't just go get the best point guard. You can't just go to a mid-major schools program and say, hey, come here, we'll pay you
It's
more,
unbelievable.
or go to high school and say, come here, right? There's a draft and free agency, and I think in the NFL in particular, that's the challenge for college coaches, is you can't just bring the 5-star in, right? Everyone's getting 5 stars every year, and there's a system that rewards the worst teams.
He and one last thing, Danny Hurley is like absolutely nuts on the sidelines. The offense they ran this year, which I think a lot of it was it's actually Bill Murray's son, Luke Murray, is kind of the guy who was credited with it. Man, they ran some beautiful stuff. So I would be very interested to see what that would look like in the NBA. Okay. Next prompt. Sorry. Okay, let's go back to the Eagles. Let's do Eagles. Convince me.
So this is the headline for the show today. It's the big picture takeaway of the offseason program. So I will jump in first. We obviously mentioned the transition on both schemes. I think there are 3 things I would tell you, though. The first is, and we addressed this already, is the offensive change. I think this is more Kellen Moore's offense than a melding of the offensive schemes. I think there's concepts that they're carrying over, but I think that's very much the case, is that they are bringing in a new offense here. Nick Sirianni is transitioning more to the CEO style coach. Like, he's not in every offensive meeting. The second big picture takeaway here is they are significantly better, in my perspective, in the secondary. If you thought that was the problem last year, they are loaded at cornerback. I think between the draft picks and Isaiah Rodgers and Kelee Ringo developing, they have 4 guys there that you feel that were not a major part of their depth chart last year, who I think are going to be in that mix this year to go along with Slay. I don't anticipate Bradbury being there. Someone like Eli Ricks, who was kind of pushing to be in the mix last year, he's like the 6th cornerback now. He's almost on the outside looking in. And that's not even getting into like Avonte Maddox and some of the other guys there. And then I think the safeties are upgraded with CJ Gardner-Johnson. So I think that is a major takeaway here. And then the third thing here, I would say, is that I think they're still figuring out what's going to happen with the offensive line. I should say right guard. And my takeaway right now is that Tyler Steen is the guy. Tyler Steen there hasn't been a Steen Hennessy turn, or rotation, something that was almost made pretty clear by Jeff Stoutland, is that he doesn't want to rotate on a day in, day out basis. But I do think Mekhi Becton could potentially be looming. We haven't seen it yet, But the fact that he played first team left guard this summer lends me to believe that if there are questions about Steen, or Steen struggling in terms of the physicality that they want to see from him, Jeff Stoutland's caveat was that you're only going to kind of put someone else in there if you think, am I making a mistake if I don't at least get a look? And there could be a time like July 15th or July 18th or July 23rd, when or I'm sorry, August 15th or August 18th or August 23rd, where you're saying, let's just see what Mekhi Becton looks like between Lane Johnson and Cam Jurgens.
That's a big boy looming. That's a big shadow over Tyler Steen, who's also very big as well. Yeah, I agree with you. I think, and to me, the kind of process-oriented stuff with Kellen Moore's offense, like that to me did not come to the forefront as much. Like, of course, listening to the Jalen quotes, there are some things that are on my radar heading into training camp, but until we actually see them play on a more consistent basis, hopefully too against, we can hold off on the judgments until they actually play against other teams too, as well. Like there are things that are on my radar, but I can't say one way or another whether they'll actually be storylines heading in, to the season and at the start of the season. To me, your second point is what excites me the most, because I think it started with the Eagles offseason. Like they poured, I think, a lot of resources into the secondary, right? Obviously they went and signed Bryce Huff, which was a nice financial commitment as well. But you're one of your other big signings, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, you get a real safety in there, even when you have two young safeties that, like, I think showed some promise, even though Sidney Brown is not going to be healthy probably at the start of the year. And then you spend not one, but two of your first two picks at cornerback. And, adding in Keely Ringo year two, adding in that some people seem to be excited about Isaiah Rodgers. It seems like there's a chance that the Eagles go from a secondary that can be good when everybody's healthy and when the pass rush is getting there to maybe this is the strength of the defense at some point. And that would be cool. And that would be a little bit different than what we have seen in past years.
Well said. Well said. Let's roll through to the next prompt here.
All right. Let's start with the miscellaneous category. Let's do miscellaneous would you rather.
Miscellaneous would you rather. So I mentioned it during the ad read, but this is a cool weekend for Phillies fans, whether they went to London or whether they're watching tomorrow and Sunday. The Phillies are playing overseas. The Phillies are playing in London this weekend. We saw on Anthony's show this morning, they were talking about it. The Eagles also opened the season in Sao Paulo, Brazil. Would you rather go to London for a Phillies game or go to Sao Paulo for an Eagles game?
Interesting. So I can't say I've ever been to Sao Paulo. Have you been to both of those places?
I have not been to Sao Paulo. I've been to London for an Eagles game, actually, when the Eagles played the Jags in 2018.
What was that like? Was there just a ton of Eagles fans walking around the city?
Yeah, a decent amount. Now, so I should actually kind of I should bring this up here because I've been asked quite a bit, like why would the NFL have a game in Brazil if it's either hard to get to from Philly and Green Bay, or maybe there's some safety concerns. And I say it's not for people it's not for people in the United States traveling there, right? Like I know there's a lot of Phillies fans there right now in London. There's Eagles fans going to Brazil. The purpose of these international games is to spread football internationally, right? It is for people who live in these countries to go to the games, to catch the bug, and therefore become fans of the sport. That is really the impetus of it, more than it is for people in Philly spending their hard-earned money to take a nice trip abroad.
So I'm with you too. I have never been to Sao Paulo. And I do think the Eagles fan base travels like it's rare in sports. Like obviously we saw the other end of it with the Knicks fans coming down here. But I will always remember I believe when I worked at the other place, the first year, it was the Super Bowl year. It was 2017 when the Eagles played in Los Angeles in that little soccer stadium.
Yep.
And it was, what was it, like 60-40 Eagles fans at
Oh,
that?
more than that. Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
More than that.
and I always kind of temper like how many fans are there, because obviously the road fan base, when they're traveling to kind of a nicer climate and they are taking over a stadium, it's going to seem like more of them are there because they're more excited, right? They're going to be louder, all of those things. Same thing with the Knicks going to the Sixers games. But I just was like blown away by that. It was crazy. Like it was just a home game in a small little soccer stadium in Los Angeles. It was really cool. So I'd rather go to London, shorter flight, cool city. Would you say it's a good food city?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's actually a great food city, but I would say that you can find good. I found like 3 really good meals when I was in London.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, I don't know, it's kind of like New York, right? It's just like New York, but a little more spread out. It's obviously very expensive, but hey, it's vacation, right? We can live a little bit for one trip. So I think I would rather do that just because it's a shorter flight, and I tend to, when I'm traveling, I tend to take the places that I know that I like. But if I was going to go to Sao Paulo, going with a bunch of my friends or family or other Eagles fans seems like a good time to do it.
So my answer here is actually I would take the Eagles game in Sao Paulo for this reason. There's more of an incentive, or there's more of an incentive to visit Sao Paulo for a game. Like if you're planning a vacation with your girlfriend, or you're planning a vacation with your family, or you're London will be higher on that list typically than Sao Paulo. I don't think that's not a leap to say. People are there's a nonstop flight from Philly to London, right? There's not typically a nonstop flight from Philly to Sao Paulo. I
Green Bay
think
to Sao Paulo? Is there a direct
what's
flight?
that?
Probably not.
Yeah,
Probably not, right?
yeah. I think there is. So I think if you want to see Sao Paulo, you're more apt to go there for an Eagles game than just if you were planning like a really nice vacation abroad. So I think there are fewer. I think there are more people who are just going to go to London to see London than go to
Yeah.
London because the Phillies are there, which is why I would venture to say Eagles and Sao Paulo.
Would you have rathered the game be just as, just in terms of this exercise, would you rather the game have been in Rio or Sao Paulo?
uh, Probably Rio. When I think of Brazil, I think more of like, the beaches, like
That's what I was getting at. Yeah.
the
The
Holy
beach.
Redeemer, right? Like
Yeah.
that's more. I think of some of the touristy places in Rio than in Sao Paulo, but I'm grateful for them. Frankly, like I'm not as well traveled internationally as I am domestically, like, because obviously I cover the Eagles. Most of my travel is for work. So I kind of wanted the Eagles to play in Germany. I had never been to Germany. I thought that'd be a cool place to go. But I would certainly, I'm looking forward to the game in Sao Paulo. I would have liked to go to the World Cup in Brazil in what was it, 2014. That would have been a cool experience.
Yeah, I'm with you. I've been to all the domestic places. I've been to Portland and Indianapolis, but not Germany and Spain. So that's I'm right there with you.
Before we get to the next one here, I just want to tell everyone about Rite Aid. You hear me talking about Rite Aid all the time on this show, and the reason I do it is because there's often times when all of us need to go to the pharmacy, and with a My Pharmacy account at Rite Aid, you can refill your prescription, schedule a vaccine, get personalized care recommendations, sign up for prescription notifications. All you need to do to get started is a prescription at Rite Aid. Get started at riteaid.com/mypharmacy. Prescriptions can sometimes cause you stress, right? You're down to your last pill and you need to get it refilled. Well, let Rite Aid refill them automatically. Enroll in automated courtesy refills. It's free, easy, and most prescriptions qualify. Talk with your Rite Aid pharmacist or sign up through your My Pharmacy account at riteaid.com. Restrictions may apply, and then you can manage the prescriptions with the Rite Aid mobile app. Transfer or refill your prescriptions, set up reminders, enroll in prescription notifications, and download from the Apple App Store or Google Play. Transfer your prescriptions to Rite Aid today. Just go to riteaid.com/transfer. Rite Aid caring pharmacists are ready to answer your questions and help you stay healthy. Get your prescriptions along with anything at Rite Aid you may need, including over-the-counter medicines, household products, cosmetics, and more. Just ask your pharmacy team for details. Restrictions apply. I talked at the top of the show about Rich's newsletter. Rich's newsletter is free, but it shows you the kind of content that we provide at PHLY. And a lot of that content is in the Die Hard tier. And with the Die Hard tier, you get premium written content for members at allphly.com. There's also 20% off events. You get a free shirt when you become a member, and the shirt is from our outstanding merchandise for all teams. You also get access to members only Discord, but PHLY has more than the Die Hard. Die Hard is a perk, but we also have events that you can find on allphly.com, including the PHLY first annual Liberty Open on July 13th at Valley Brook Country Club in Blackwood, New Jersey. It's a scramble format. You can sign up as a single, a foursome, or sponsor a hole. And then I mentioned the Phillies playing in London this weekend. We will be at Gall & Co. When I say we, PHLY, we'll be at Gall & Co. for the London series versus the Mets, June 8th and 9th. Check out allphly for more information. Head over to allphly.com now and join the best sports fans in the city. Did I lose Rich? Oh, there you are. Okay.
Well done.
Okay, good.
Okay, last one.
I got worried. I came back from the ad read, and I was like, am I solo here? I got 18 more minutes left. I got to run point with no one here.
No, your diehard read just knocked my socks off, and I just had to get off the call.
Good.
Okay, last one. Let's do last Eagles one. Let's do Eagles prediction.
Yeah. So what's the narrative about Jalen Hurts at the end of training camp? Because Jalen Hurts has been a topic of conversation. He's been, I think, he hasn't blown your socks off here watching him, which is fine. He's adjusting to a new offense. Gave a cryptic answer yesterday about Nick Sirianni. He didn't necessarily, he wasn't like effusive about Sirianni, which might have just kind of been Jalen's own way of answering a question. But when we have this conversation, you and I, on September 1st, what's the narrative about Jalen Hurts?
Yeah, I think it's kind of what we've already been talking about, but in the form of a question is like, I think people are going to be wondering how this whole Kellen Moore offense and specifically how he handles this Kellen Moore offense, how that whole thing is going to go, how the motion and the option routes that Devontae and AJ have been talking about. And like, look, Zach, this is a big year for Hurts. Like, I was mostly willing to give him a pass for last year because I just did not think the coaching or the scheme was giving him any answers. Now, as you and plenty of others have pointed out, like how much of that is coaching, how much of that is Jalen's preference, I don't know. But since he was so great and since he improved so much in his first few years, willing to give him a pass on this. But Kellen Moore, while not Andy Reid at this point, clearly is a pretty competent offensive coordinator. So, I think if things go wrong here, I think eyes are going to turn to Jalen Hurts and be like, well, what exactly are you getting from this guy? So I think the narrative is, even if it's not negative, there's just going to be a lot of, I think there's going to be a lot of intrigue in just how this whole thing goes if they are changing the offense up so much.
Yeah, good point. I think that to what you said, I think the narrative at the end of the summer, at the end of training camp, is going to be like, we still don't know. I don't think Jalen Hurts is going to be lights out this summer. I think there are going to be times when it looks like there are growing pains. And I think one of the big questions is going to be like, how's this Jalen Hurts Kellen Moore match? This quarterback or this offense is supposed to be quarterback friendly, right? But every quarterback's different. And what's conducive for one quarterback's different than the other quarterback. And what I want to see too is like, what is Kellen Moore doing to maximize Jalen Hurts? Not what is Kellen Moore doing to maximize Kellen Moore. What is Kellen Moore doing to maximize Jalen Hurts? Because I think those are two different questions, and you need to build the offense that best fits the personnel that you have. And it can't be, if there are concepts in this offense that Dak runs better than Hurts, or that fit Justin Herbert better than Hurts, those aren't concepts you want to highlight. You want to highlight the concepts that Jalen does well. And so I'm curious to see, but I think Jalen is an extraordinarily talented quarterback who works hard. And I think maybe more important than that, or as important as that, I think he has elite players around him. And I think the conditions are in place for Jalen to succeed. Where I am mostly interested in seeing is avoiding turnovers and making quick decisions. And if he can do those two things well, I think they can be an electric offense.
Look, the skill position talent right now is like outrageous, and we'll see what happens with the offensive line. As you said, there are a couple spots that are bigger question marks than we have been used to over the years, especially because you don't have Jason Kelsey to make up for any issues that might be on either side of him. But like, look, if the offensive line is not a disaster, last year's offensive, like, what did they finish? Like 8th in offense? What's the Nick Sirianni thing? Top 10. And I think that's right around where they finished in DVOA. That's not good enough. Got to be better than that this year. Got to be. I'm not saying you need to be the top offense in the league, but you have to be one of the top offenses in the league. Like, there's too much talent, and as much as the Vic Fangio coaching, we hope that that changes the defense and that he is an upgrade over the pencil. Like, the talent, this team is built to score a lot of points, and that is primarily how they have to win games. So it's a big year for him, but I think you're right. Like, we're just not going to know heading into the season, and that's what the first month, that's what the Brazil game, that's what all those things are going to be about.
Yeah, I would venture to say that if they're not a top 10 offense, neither Nick nor Kellen will be here next year. All right, we have 12 minutes, 4 questions, so 3 minutes each. Let's get moving here. You picked your prompt.
All right, let's go. NFL, convince me.
NFL, convince me. Does tampering matter? And I asked that, of course, because Adam Schefter had the news earlier this week that the NFL's rulings on 2 potential tampering situations, Philly with Saquon, Atlanta with Kirk Cousins, is coming down the pike. We might even get a Friday news dump for all we know. You've covered Sixers during times when tampering has certainly come up, and the Sixers have been penalized for it. I have perspective on this, but I'm curious your thinking is tampering something that's made too big a deal of in sports, or do you think it's a legitimate issue?
Well, I think it definitely gets made too big of a deal. Like, it fans want to say that they were cheated or other teams are cheating, right? Like, that's clearly a thing. So having the tampering idea, like people latch on to those storylines. In the NFL, does tampering matter? I guess to me, the question is, like, what is the penalty? Like, what is the penalty that the Eagles are going to get for this? Is it like a 5th round pick, a 6th round pick?
Well, I think the Eagles are pretty confident right now that they're in the clear. We'll see, but if something's up, if something's small, a late round pick are fine. But if something's big, like if Atlanta was working this Kirk Cousins deal out before they were allowed out, it could be a high draft pick. You've seen mid-round picks get docked. You've seen, the Dolphins lost a first-round pick for tampering with Tom Brady, right? So this is, the NFL will come down hard on you if it's like if it's a legitimate tampering issue.
Well, and I also think the NFL is different in that, like, as exciting as the Saquon signing is, free agency, and specifically one player's free agency, does not matter as much in the NFL as it can matter in the NBA. I think Paul George was the first one when the Lakers were trying to get him. They were tampering. Like, it was funny when the Sixers got docked for tampering. It was for PJ Tucker and Daniel House Jr. Those are like the 2 worst players that you would ever tamper for. Like, that
you gotta make the tampering worth it. Yeah,
that was the funny thing about that. And they lost a couple of 2nd round picks, which again, like, would have been useful to be able to throw in trades and stuff. Also, is not like making or breaking whether the Sixers are a championship level team. So I tend to lean towards, in this situation, specifically the Eagles situation, no.
I think tampering is overstated because I think tampering happens in every sport. I think tampering happens in every business, right? And I think that it's I actually don't think tampering makes a difference in someone's decision. Typically, I think if a player is determined to leave or determined to seek opportunities elsewhere, he or she is going to seek those opportunities. when like the schedule formula allows them, or if they're quote unquote being tampered with. Like, you kept hearing that the Heat might have, tampered with putting the big three together, right? You don't think that like the big three were planning this? Or there's all those talks of when they were in the Olympics talking about this, and I think that's kind of what it is that I think tampering can be overstated. Like you said, it's something for teams and fan bases to complain about, but I think it's inconsequential relative to the coverage that it gets.
It's also an agent's job to, at the start of the free agent period, know generally what offers are going to be available to their clients, right? And I don't know how that conversation starts and they get that knowledge without at least a little bit of tampering. I'm sure they do it in kind of back channels and, maybe whisper down the lane type of things. But yeah, I think your point that it happens a lot in pretty much every sport is the right one. So I don't really know exactly like what is the line where you start to enforce it and not, but leave that up to the league.
Yeah. And we will be monitoring it today to see if there's any rulings or no rulings at all on those two cases. All right. 8 minutes, 2 prompts here, both in miscellaneous. Your pick.
Miscellaneous convince me.
Miscellaneous convinced me. Okay. Watching the NBA game last night and 2 players that on the Celtics that the Sixers could have had. All right. And we've talked about both these picks over the years. Which was a bigger draft miss for the Eagles considering the player and the context? Porzingis in 2015 when they took Okafor 1 pick earlier, or Tatum in 2017 when they swapped with the Celtics and took Fultz 2 picks earlier?
Well, I think the only fair answer is Porzingis, and Tatum is a better player than Porzingis. But the way that it has been described to me is that they really didn't have a shot at Jason Tatum. Like Boston, and I think, and it pains me to say this, one of the best things that Danny Ainge has done, and one of the best things really any GM has done, he saw that there was something wrong with Markelle Fultz. There was something off there, and it has not been explained by him, but they were not taking him with the first overall pick, and he decided that Jason Tatum was his guy. So he must have had intel, because if you remember, the Sixers were picking 3rd that year. The Lakers were going to pick either Fultz or Lonzo Ball. So he reasoned that, hey, Sixers, like, if you want the first overall pick and if you want the ability to take Fultz or Ball, whichever one, you can do that. And we will trade back to you. You got to give us some stuff. It was a pretty nice first round pick that they took as well. And we'll just take Tatum at 3rd. But I don't think the Sixers could have traded up to 1 and then drafted Tatum. Like there was an element of the Celtics asked the Sixers, like, who are you drafting? We're not going to, you have the first overall pick. So like, we do care on who you select, but like, it's obviously not going to affect your plans moving forward once we give you the pick. And, some people might say that's silly, like make the trade and just draft Tatum anyway. But at the time, Fultz was considered the number 1 guy. Like he was the best guy in college that year, and he just forgot how to shoot for whatever reason. And Danny Ainge was all over that. So the answer is Porzingis. And I think the Sixers, there's still a lot of disagreement over who made that pick, whether Sam Hinkie like actually wanted Porzingis or if he was a little bit pressured, and if, all of the losing, all of the off the court storylines, all of kind of the embarrassment that comes with, losing 60 plus games a year had caught up to him, and that they said, we got to take the quote unquote safe pick. We got to take the national champion center from Duke, Jahlil Okafor, because honestly, like looking back at Hinkie's tenure, like I feel like in the earlier years, they might have taken Porzingis, who was considered kind of this wild, crazy swing. And it's funny that Okafor is the safe option when in reality, he was the least safe option in NBA history. Like when you are a bad defensive center that doesn't have any range, like, I remember Brett Brown saying he'll roll out of bed and give you 20 and 10. Like, doesn't really matter when you give up 35 on the other end and like aren't really like creating advantages for your teammates on offense. So that is the answer of those two. I as much as it hurts that the Sixers didn't get Tatum, and that would have changed their fortunes for sure. I don't really think they had any chance to get him. Like if they actually wanted Tatum, I think the Celtics would have just taken Tatum with the first overall pick that year.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying exactly, and I agree with you. Like I understand the safe part of it. Okafor from the national champions, Duke was the top high school player, was in the national consciousness for like 5 or 6 years before that, right? It's almost like the Sixers. It's almost like the Eagles taking Devontae, right? Like this is a guy who everyone knows.
Yep.
But my issue, and I felt this way at the time, and I still feel this way now, is if you're committed to rebuilding the way the Sixers were then, and just going for upside, right? Everything is about the home run swing. And Embiid at 3 is the home run swing. Like trading Drew and taking Noel. It's the home runs. Everything's the home run swing. Then the 7-3 Porzingis, with range, who if he hits fits with Embiid. That to me is the swing you take, given like everything that the Sixers did there. Before we get to the last prompt, we do have a super chat from Brian Pumper, which is lots of Eagles players at the Celtics game. If only Philly had a team they could publicly support. Kind of embarrassing.
Sure. You know why they're there, though, Zach.
Well, Jeffrey Lurie's a Boston guy. Devontae Smith is actually a Celtics fan. Devontae Smith grew up a Celtics fan. But, yeah, Jeffrey Lurie has taken these guys to Boston in the past. Now, that said, if the Sixers were playing across the street last night, the Eagles would have been there.
Sure.
So, yeah, I think I would imagine that those Eagles who went to Boston and flew up there for that game, and who wouldn't want a chance to see game 1 of the NBA Finals, right? But if they had the opportunity to just drive across the street and see an NBA Finals game, I would imagine they would have preferred that.
Jeffrey Lurie has been taking Eagles to Celtics conference finals and NBA Finals games for like 15 years at this point. So it's not the first time. And I think he is kind of the clear person who is driving that, who is getting them the tickets. If I had to guess, he's the guy who's getting them the tickets or the suite or whatever, and taking them to the game, which is cool.
So this leads us to our last one, actually, when we talk about how far the Sixers could go here. This is the predict in miscellaneous. I'm fascinated with your thoughts. You write the newsletter every day. You see, or you're following all these Philly teams. Rank these 4 outcomes from most likely to occur to least likely occur for this season. So we're talking the Phillies now, the Eagles in 2024, the Sixers and Flyers in 2024-2025 season. Phillies win the World Series. Eagles make the Super Bowl. Sixers make the Eastern Conference Finals, or Flyers make round 2 of the postseason. So there's a sliding scale here, probably in terms of the quality of the teams as well.
This is bad. I think the Sixers making the Eastern Conference Finals is the most likely of those 4.
Interesting. Okay.
I just think like they're probably the 3rd best team of the bunch, but you've raised the bar on the other ones. Like the Phillies have to win the World Series. Like obviously they look like they're going to win 110 games or whatever. They can play. I think they can play 500 ball and still the rest of the way and still have 94 wins, which they're not going to play 500 ball. They're going to be a lot better than that, obviously. But you have to win the World Series, Zach. Like stupid stuff happens in the baseball playoffs. It's the opposite. It's like the Phillies are in the Braves position now. Now, hopefully they handle it better than the Braves and they can continue to stay hot through October. But like the baseball playoffs are so unbelievably stupid. So I think I have to rank the Sixers number 1 because like, all right, yeah, Boston's difficult, but the Sixers are going to be a better team next year. And yeah, I think they're going to be number 1. And then you mentioned the Eagles making the Super Bowl, also very difficult.
Sure.
Like, if it was Eagles making the NFC Championship game, maybe I would have had them first. If it was Phillies just making the World Series, but I think you have raised the bar for those teams so much that I look at the NBA, the Eastern Conference is just not very good, and I would rank the Sixers first. I think I'd probably rank the Eagles second in that group because like what have you and Bo said is success for this team? Like second round making it?
Oh no, I think conference championship or
Okay.
farther. Yeah.
Okay.
I
And
think they're one of the 2-3 best teams in the NFC.
okay, so that's, if that is actually the case and they are, one of the three. So you think the Lions and the Niners are the other two?
Yep. Yeah, I would say so right now.
So, okay, that's like a 30% shot. You got to factor in some of the other teams too a little bit, high 20s, something like that. I'd probably put that second. Philly's third, I'd say, because they're great. And like it's just really hard to win a World Series. Like it's kind of what Daryl Morey always talks about team building in terms of championship odds. And he's like, if you have more than a 5% shot, you got to go for it. And he's basically like, if you have like a 10% shot, that's way better odds than the average person would think, just because it's so hard and it's so competitive and you need skill, you need talent, and you need luck on your side on the way to a title. And I think the Phillies are going to be in a good position, man. Like they're trending to be the best Phillies regular season team of our lifetime, probably. But the playoffs suck, man. The playoffs are just you better have your shit together in the divisional round. And then I'd say the Flyers last, although it's like lowering the bar for them is making that kind of interesting as well. I don't know. It seems like they're gonna have trouble making the playoffs next year.
Yeah, I actually I hear what you're saying because I went kind of like the inverse here. The Flyers making round 2 of the postseason. You're just one of 8 teams who does that at that point. I feel more comfortable even though they're the worst of these 4 teams, being 8 of 30, right? Than being 1 of 30. So Phillies winning the World Series is probably the hardest, but they certainly can do it. Sixers making the Eastern Conference Finals. I'll have a better answer for you in a month when I see who that third guy is. But I would agree. But yeah, that's a good question. I'm curious. Maybe you can use that in your newsletter at some point this summer. But we are we're at 103 here. It's been a quick, fun edition of, I will call it, Rich Zach-Bo. Maybe we can adopt that now because I imagine we'll be doing some more shows this summer together. And I appreciate you coming on with us.
And we could just make it so the 2 of the 3 people who are there, this is Rich Zach-To today.
There you go. Yeah. Today's Rich Zach-To. When I'm not there, it's Rich Tac-Bo. I like that. I like that. So thank you for joining today's edition of Rich Zach-To. Bo and I will be back Monday for a full week in studio of the PHLY Eagles show. You can find all our coverage on allphly.com. You can read Rich's newsletter every day in your inbox, and we appreciate Bree's help putting everything together here. So until then, that's Rich. I'm Zach. Thanks for joining us. Bo would say, we love you. I would say, we'll do better next time. Thanks for watching.